Hello, Rick Miracle here again with another video with the series Freemasonry and Satanism. And I think this will be the last part of 59, part 7 of this book. Flying Saucers, Fact or Fiction by Max Miller. I think it's important to pay attention to the dates of these books, what happened back during those periods. For example, the year that Kennedy got killed. This book here was copyrighted in 1957, and Kennedy was killed 6 years later in '63. So what was the motive? Was it a sincere attempt to discuss the flying saucer issue? Was it propaganda to change the social consciousness of USA and world citizens? It's interesting. And you see some of the people who express their opinions. You can't help but pay attention and wonder why, who, and what. For example, the Swedish physicist Professor Benedicts suggested that this was a small percentage due to ball lightning. So they were trying to, the Air Force, according to what I've been reading, and we're going to do another bit of the NICAP journal. But apparently there were people who were writing books, sincerely trying to get the word out. And then there were people writing books that were using it as propaganda. The aliens are coming. The aliens are here. They're going to invade Earth. And then you have the Air Force, the Pentagon, the presidents, and many others trying to ridicule people who say they saw flying saucers and have the whole thing issue dismissed. Why? So anyways, Mr. Professor Benedicts, and I'm only reading a little highlighted issue here, and very little from this book today, the NICAP issue, October to November 1966. This issue is pretty explosive. Quite interesting. So anyways, the professor says, not my own explanation of the unsolved percentage of UFOs is that they are machines built in some place other than Russia and countries on the earth. That's what the professor said. I do not, in fact, think that Russia is building any UFOs at all. On the contrary, I believe they originated exclusively from outside the earth. For these reasons, observations suggest that flying saucers are able to suppress the force of gravity, and I do not think that anyone on earth has yet found the means to do so. B, if they were a Russian secret weapon, it is hardly likely that the risk would be taken of allowing anyone to be shot down or captured by the Americans. And I might add, a lot of the sightings where the UFOs seem to be playing tag with airliners, Air Force jets, cars on the ground, people. It seems like the UFO craft, whether they were gleaming metal or glowing orbs, seem to be playing with the observers. This is an important point to pay attention. Very important, I believe. Moving on, having weighed all the pros and cons, I find the explanation of flying disc from outer space the most likely one. So says the professor. I call this the uranium hypothesis because from our viewpoint, the hypothetical beings appear to come from the sky. There seems to me to be so far only two worthwhile objections to this theory. It is true that within our solar system, perhaps only Mars, apart from the Earth, supports life as we know it. On the other hand, our solar system is not the only one in the universe. The Milky Way alone has 550,000 suns like ours, and 40% of these, according to the latest astrophysical information, are surrounded by planets as our sun is, and there are 500,000 Milky Way galaxies out there. Wow, that's a lot of galaxies. 500 million. It's a big universe. How do they know there's that many? Maybe there's less, maybe there's more. The second objection which has been made is that the passengers of flying saucers do not appear to emerge and say good day to us. My answer is that they probably don't think it's worth bothering to do so. Makes you wonder, do these entities on these crafts, if they're interdimensional, interplanetary, intergalactic, do they see us humans as mere cattle? Maybe even like bugs, pests? Good question. Of course, we have the Georgia USA Guidestones that say they want to have a world population of 500 million. And that presents a problem if we have 7 billion. Because I guess 6 billion plus have to go. And it is becoming clearer and clearer that the activities of the sky spraying, the HARP systems, the fluorides in the water, the vaccines, and emissions from radio towers, and even the foods and drinks with aspartame that Rumsfeld said he would get forced to be accepted no matter what he had to do to call in all the markers and favors that people owed him. Why were they so bent on putting toxic aspartame in our soda and food? My point is, with all those detrimental activities going on Earth, it seems that somebody is slowly causing the death rate to go up and the birth rate to go down, sterilization. It's admitted they're doing that in many countries. Hitler was into that. In the early 1900s, the United States of America was into that. Anyways, getting back to the UFO and the aliens, seeing us humans as possible bugs or pests or cattle, these conclusions of mine are based on the present reported observations. But tomorrow my opinion may be changed by some new report. I can only say, based on what I know today, I believe the Uranian hypothesis to be the most probable answer to the unexplained percentage of UFO reports. And I've got to tell you, it's taxing my mind and my consciousness for what I'm supposed to believe by reading this stuff. And more. Wait till you see the next book, Freemasonry and Satanism, number 60. We're going to investigate the Palladians. Fascinating what these Palladians say, who they are, and what they're trying to accomplish. Remember that when we're going over this nightcap report coming up. But anyways, the last little bit more of looking at this book. Apparently out there in Southern California desert, they got this giant rock, the interplanetary airport saucers and aircraft welcome back in 1957. Remember that in this book here. And I'll show you a couple pictures that are kind of cool. But back then, by plane and auto, flying saucer enthusiasts arrived at Giant Rock Airport, Southern California desert, from everywhere. Giant Rock on the desert floor was the focal point of spacecraft conventioneers who gathered to hear the latest on flying saucers, and it shows some of the famous people, the crowds of people, the authors of The Secret of the Flying Saucer, Ophiro Angelusio, George Van Tassel authored I Rode a Flying Saucer, Frank Scully, Behind the Flying Saucers, and Truman Bennerum autographs his book Aboard a Flying Saucer. So here you go. Bring the book to you. Fascinating collecting these old books. Space Travel and the UFO. It's the next chapter. Like I said, I could do another 10 hours on this book. And I may do another, number 70 or something. Another 5 or 6. Because chapter 6 just seems really cool. I did read it, as you can see all my highlighting. But I thought, I could just keep on beating this up forever on this book, and I got so many other books. So I did preview it all. But you got to stop somewhere. With that said, this Nightcap UFO Investigator Edition is just really cool. October, November 1966. Prominent scientist praises Nightcap, calls Air Force study appalling. In a recent scientific address to Washington, Dr. James E. McDonald, University of Arizona physicist, strongly criticized the Air Force handling of the UFO problem and labeled Nightcap's investigation as far more thorough and reliable. Dr. McDonald, a senior physicist at the university's Institute of Atmospheric Physics, spoke before the Washington chapter of the American Meteorological Society on October 19, 1966. The Arizona scientist told the AMS, the Atmospheric Meteorological Society, that the extraterrestrial theory is the least unsatisfactory hypothesis, which means it's probably the most probable hypothesis. He said he reached this conclusion after an intensive study of the UFO evidence and visits to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to evaluate the work of Project Blue Book. The main force of his talk, however, was directed towards showing the need for a thorough scientific review of the facts. The present urgent need is for a much more scientific examination of available UFO evidence in order to establish or to reject, as the case may be, the very interesting possibility that these aerial objects may be some type of extraterrestrial probes. That's pretty profound. stated Mr. McDonald, who had been intensively studying the phenomenon full-time for about 6 months prior to that. He had interviewed witnesses off and on for 10 years. NASA and other space-oriented agencies might be appropriately involved in new investigations, he suggested. The atmospheric physicists also praised NICAP highly and regarded the new University of Colorado program as a significant step forward. That would be the Condom Report, which later turned out to be a big dud. They pretty much dismissed everything, which shot the whole UFO issue out of the public media. It was ridiculed so much. He said that, in his opinion, the figures on UFO sighting breakdowns published by Project Blue Book are completely worthless. Project Blue Book was the Air Force Department of Information for the public's appeasement. In other words, if people needed someplace to go report what they saw because they were concerned or freaking out, the Air Force provided a platform for that. And it took all the data and did nothing with it and dismissed case after case. But behind the scenes, from my investigation, they didn't dismiss it, but in the public eye, they wanted it to seem foolish to believe in UFOs. When, if you go on MUFON.com today, March 27th, 2015, and check out the reports in the United States today. In the last 20 days, they have a little icon you can push. The work of independent organizations such as the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, that's these guys, whose efforts impress me as much more thorough and open-minded than these of Project Blue Book, should be exploited and incorporated into all future studies. When you read some of the reports in this NICAP report, I think you'll agree. Dr. McDonald said. Dr. McDonald is a member of the advisory panel of Joint NASA, ESA, Project Storm Fury. This is where this NICAP report gets a little interesting. Hurricane modification. I'm going to read that sentence again. Dr. McDonald is a member of the advisory panel on Joint Navy, ESSA, Project Storm Fury, Hurricane Modification. The AMS Publications Commission and the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Weather and Climate Modification. Oh my God. This is 1966. They had the AMS Commission and National Academy of Sciences Committee on Weather and Climate Modification. The sky spring, the HARP systems, the crazy global warming that we now know was a big fabricated issue, admitted by the Secretary to the United Nations. Propaganda was used, global warming, to demolish, crush, eliminate capitalism, which means, if you want to understand English, is to bring about communism, forced socialism, i.e. slavery with microchips, 666, the mark of the beast, right out of the Bible. It says it in this 1966 October-November NICAP report. He was also a research physicist for the Cloud Physics Project at the University of Chicago, 1953 to 1954. So this chemtrailing, sky spraying, HARP system, weather modification, global warming, global cooling, climate change, propaganda fiasco has been going on since at least the end of World War II. Anyways, and he served 4 years in the Navy intelligence during World War II. So once they got the United Nations formed and succeeded in with Project Paperclip, bringing all the German scientists and all the technical document and equipment to the USA, and Russia got some of their scientists and some of the equipment, Argentina and France and the UK, Britain, all these countries, Russia, started their own high-tech black op projects. And to get all the money, apparently according to a lot of books that I have read, the Cold War scare, propaganda, I guess convinced the people of the world to allow their governments to have tons of money to do all these high-tech programs, black op projects, underground cities, tunnels, biological weapons, Leonard Horowitz, AIDS and Ebola, testing AIDS, creating AIDS in laboratories, and so much more. Project Montauk, abducting young boys, doing experiments, sending them into time vortexes even, mind controlling them, sexual exploitation, sacrificing them, killing them, bizarre experiments. Look all this up. So these NICAP reports, when I read it, I pay attention to little details. The scientists obtained a small grant from the University of Arizona last spring to probe the phenomenon more thoroughly. Since then, he has made trips and calls throughout the country, including visits to NICAP and Project Blue Book at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Daytona, Ohio, to gather data. Okay, it was at Wright-Patterson. That's where they were supposed to have taken the UFO alien body after the Roswell crash. He found evidence that the CIA in 1953, during considerations of the Robinson Panel report, see separate story, persuaded the Air Force to debunk. Here we go, another little tidbit. He found evidence. This was Dr. James McDonald doing his research into the UFO situation, that the CIA in 1953, during considerations of the Robinson Panel report, see separate story, persuaded the Air Force to debunk UFO reports for national security reasons. Back then in 1966, they were getting away with murder under the disguise of national security reasons. Also, apparently, over there in the UK, Britain, it was a huge pedophilia, child molestation, sexual assault, murder even, investigation that was so big and involved so many people in such high places that they had to cease and desist. In the newspapers, it said this, press releases, the investigation because of national security. They couldn't investigate and expose the pedophiles in high government places. Now, what's behind that? Remember, this series is Freemasonry and Satanism, which, as I've said numerous times, should be called Freemasonry, Illuminati, Rosicrucian, Zionism, Kabbalah, witchcraft, banksters, kings and queens, and the other elitist that we have been examining, and all the other thousands, the Bohemian Grove, the Club of Rome, the Heritage Foundation, the Council of Foreign Relations. And remember, these are just the organizations we know of in the USA. Like I said, and I showed you a book on Beware of the Rainbow. We went over that book. There are literally thousands of these cultic organizations. And apparently, child pornography, child sacrifice, child pedophilia is all part of these occultic, satanic ritual things, like with the Bohemian Grove, where Alex Jones snuck in there and videotaped them throwing a baby in a burning fire under a giant owl Moloch. Look it up. Don't believe anything I tell you. That's why I do book reports. Because I'm reading from material. It's not Rick here saying, this is what I'm telling you to believe. There's many ways that people are contributing to the disclosure of what's going on this planet. But my method is to collect books. This next one, Series 60, is going to be the bomb. Wait till you see what these Palladians are saying, who and what they are. They even acknowledge the fact that Zechariah Stitchin's Anunnaki are another race of beings that have been on our planet and I guess are coming back if they're not already here. The Palladians say that they're here. Then you got the Vedas, reptilians, the Greys. What is real? Can we afford to dismiss all this when we're reading here in 1966 that Mr. McDonald was a member of the advisory panel for the Navy planet Storm Fury hurricane modification? Modification what? To diffuse it or to enhance it? Weather warfare? Weather modification? It's right in this 1966 document. All right. So anyways, back here, the Air Force was persuaded to debunk UFO reports for national security reasons, despite the fact that the Air Force had repeatedly asserted that UFOs were not a danger. Well, I would think that if these Palladians are telling us what they're telling us, and the Anunnaki are coming back with Planet Nibiru, and the government is modifying the weather along with the United Nations to rid the world of capitalism, which means we all become microchipped slaves, efficient, report to work at 6 and go home at 6, 1 hour playtime, have a meal, go to bed, go to work, play, meal, go to bed, work, play. Do they want to have an efficient, controlled cattle society? Are there really Palladians and aliens that look at us as just cattle? Or worse, unwanted food eaters, which has been mentioned by politicians like Kissinger. George Bush Sr. mentions New World Order. The Pope mentions New World Order. Obama mentions New World Order. They're talking about forced vaccines. When you put all this together, it's a recipe for a disaster for us citizens worldwide. So anyways, the Air Force was supposed to debunk UFO reports for national security reasons, despite the fact that the Air Force has repeatedly asserted that UFOs were not a danger. He first broke the CIA document story in a speech on his own campus on October 5th. He further stated that the AMS, the Astronautical Meteorological Society, meeting that the official explanations were almost absurdly erroneous. The Air Force's explanations for reported UFO reports by citizens, by Air Force pilots, by commercial airline pilots, by Air Force people in airport people in the at the airports tracking the planes. That Reagan fired them all and said you'll never work in this industry again. Air traffic controllers. It's probably something more to that. So the Air Force, when they took reports from the public, no matter how detailed they were, how many witnesses, how credible, almost absurdly erroneous, and that Blue Book's investigations have been carried out at a very low level of scientific competence. Those people in charge of Blue Book admitted it. They were supposed to give reports to the media and the public that pretty much said that there were no UFOs. It was all misidentifications. Planet Venus, planet Mars, a mirage, a balloon, or maybe a kid's toy. So, anyways, the scientific UFO, University starts UFO probe, NICAP. So Mr. Edward Condon, and the report became out of the University of Colorado. And here he is, and it was called the Condon Report. And everybody had high expectations that the University of Colorado, who was given money, a grant, thousands of dollars, that something serious would come out of it. But this man here, Mr. Condon, who was a UFO skeptic, pretty much as we have seen in the past, and from my studies, Dr. Condon, quoted as being a UFO agnostic, has a reputation for outspokenness, as well as a considerable scientific reputation. So anyways, his report, that whole thing that had high expectations, turned out to be worthless from my reading of this whole first page. Like I said, there's more interesting stuff in this issue. Here's an editorial. Whether the results turn out to be our liking or not, on the Condon Report from the University of Colorado, the forthcoming review of the UFO problem by scientists at the University of Colorado is far and away the most significant development in the history of the UFO investigation. For the first time, well-qualified professional scientists are planning an intensive study of UFOs and examining the adequacy of the Air Force's Project Blue Book. Again, this is 1966. Later books written by UFO authors and investigators said that the Condon Report was a complete whitewash of the whole issue, which pretty much took the UFO issue out of the mainstream media. And the newspapers wouldn't publish any reports. And who owns the newspapers? What did Rockefeller say to one of his cohorts, people that work for him? He said, how many newspapers do I have to own in the United States to pretty much control the market and the United States what the people read? And he was given a number, 50 main city newspapers. And Mr. Rockefeller went out of his way to acquire that many. And since then, the news that we get is propaganda. We are fed what they want us to think. All right, moving on. Dr. McDonald stated that the CIA report was aimed at decreasing public attention to UFOs, with the reasoning that in the event of an enemy attack on the country, the clogging of the military intelligence channels with large numbers of reports of evidently non-hostile UFOs was regarded as an unacceptable risk. So they were trying to dismiss it in the public's eye, again under the threat of national security. Can't be arresting high-level politicians for pedophilia, child molestation, and sacrificing them at the Bohemian Grove, because it's a national security threat to expose the fact what our leaders are into, the Illuminati, Freemasons, Kabbalah, Zionism, witchcraft, if you want to call it that, occultism. What does that have to do with the Palladians? Flying saucers. if we do have a threat, I don't think it's threats from different directions. I think it's a well-organized threat. As Albert Pike in the late 1880s wrote a letter to his friend in Europe, anybody can look it up, Albert Pike's letter, detailing 3 world wars. Just Google it. Probably get 1 million results. You'll be able to read the letter. He's the one who wrote Morals and Dogma, the Bible for the Freemasons, which he got through channeling. Some kind of spirit Albert Pike was channeling. And who are the Pleiades? Well, Barbara Manichek here in this book got all the information from the Pleiadians by channeling. Oh my. Alright, the scientists had also added that such influences as the official debunking, the cultist groups, and journalistic fun-poking, see what I mean? Have misled both the public and the scientific community into thinking that no significant problem exists with respect to UFOs. Well, if Albert Pike was channeling some entities on the other side, demonic fallen angels, Anunnaki, Palladians, reptilians, the Greys, Vedas, Galactic Federation, spirits, who knows? And they want 3 world wars, I would have to say, maybe we should hang up the phone on those intergalactic, spiritual, channeled entities and not have that information used as a guidebook for the future of Earth. Just saying. Alright, during the question and answer period of the AMS talk, the ball lightning plasma theory was put forth by Philip Koss, a senior editor for Aviation Week. Dr. McDonald does not regard the plasma theory as scientifically valid for more than a tiny percentage of the cases. Hynek's campaigns for investigation. A letter by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a popular person in the UFO world, first refused publication. So Dr. Hynek wrote a letter to the Issue of Science, the official organ of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Anyways, they rejected his letter. He finally went to the public media, and somebody published his letter, and the information finally got out to the public. All right, 1953, page 3. "1953 CIA report debunks UFOs and the public." Again, another very interesting essay here, worth paying attention to. A broad program aimed specifically at debunking UFO reports was strongly recommended by a scientific advisory panel convened in January 1953 by the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, to investigate the possibility of a national security threat by UFOs. Interesting. A sanitized version of the panel report, first published by John Lear in Saturday Review, September 3rd, was recently released to the public through the U.S. Air Force Office of Information. The full report has been classified and declassified off and on for years. The overridden assumption of the panel, chaired by H.P. Robinson of the California Institute of Technology, was that the public, you're going to love this, You have to remember now, with the advent of TV, remember they used to have the information about you could be watching a movie and subliminally they would flash a hot dog or a soda on the screen. You couldn't see it. It's going so fast. You're watching the movie. In the middle of the movie would be a hot dog. Maybe some cotton candy. So you're sitting in the movie theater and all of a sudden you're thinking, man, I gotta get a Coke, a hot dog, because of the subliminal message. Well, my point is, after World War II, and Hitler was big time into this, this is where the fluoride in the water becomes an issue too. Hitler was using that to make the prisoners lethargic, slow, kind of dumb, fatigued, ill. And thus it required less guards to guard them. I guess you could call it they were sedated with the fluoride in the water. Then after, and all during the early 1920s, 30s, 40s, Rockefeller was going out of his way, city to city, town to town, forcing fluoride in the water of the supplies. And of course they used the excuse to protect the children's teeth. But it slowed down the intelligence and the energy of the USA people for a reason. There was a planned New World Order, and they did not need 100 million, 200 million of alert, intelligent USA citizens. And Vietnam War, they admitted, that was to introduce drugs into the United States. All right, what I'm about to read next ought to get you. So 1953 CIA report debunks UFOs in the public. The overriding assumption of the panel chaired by H.P. Robinson of the California Institute of Technology was that the public is gullible and generally incompetent as observers. A strong bias against the possibility of UFOs is evident in the report. So that's what they think of we, the people. We're gullible. And that's another big, big problem. You know, when you have two sects of society, the aggressors, the Satanists, the witchcraft, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, meeting in secret, that they say, we got the books, we've watched my videos. If this is the first video of mine that you've seen, you need to back up. All the stuff has been gone over in detail. They were meeting in secret. President Roosevelt said, presidents are not elected, they are selected. President Wilson said, there is a nefarious force so dark, so sinister. If you mention it, you better mention it under your breath so nobody can hear you. President Kennedy said that this secret cabal running the country and the world was behind the scenes, and that he ventured to expose it. What? He was dead within days. So Albert Pike's channeling entities. Helena Blavatsky's channeling entities. Alice Bailey is channeling entities. Barbara Manichek is channeling entities. And the people are gullible. So like I said, there's two types of people. The ones that we need to be worried about, and the rest of us. And the rest of us that are decent people, when we read the paper, we want to believe what we're reading. That they own the paper. They own the nightly news. They own the Oscars. They put Neil Patrick Harris up there in his underwear on purpose. Miley Cyrus getting twerked on stage on purpose. Madonna doing her imitation of the devil's demon Lucifer on purpose. Katy Perry riding the bull with the glowing eyes, doing a satanic ritual on stage on purpose. Britney Spears taking the lead from Madonna, becoming the queen demoness, and then freaking out, shaved her head, spoke in tongues, freaked out her bodyguard that he quit and ran. Lady Gaga at the Olympics, satanic ritual on purpose. Beyonce, football Super Bowl halftime show, satanic ritual on purpose. Bohemian Grove, throwing a child in the fire. If you even look up on the internet, Miles Johnston, the Basis series, and all the people that have come forward and talked about mind control and abductions, Kathy O'Brien, sexual abuse by presidents and people in high places. It's all part of a satanic ritual. And all these people who are feeding us the New Age, who are talking about sex, have gotten all the information through channeling. What has it got to do with UFO and aliens and the CIA, considering, reading right here on page 3, that the people are gullible. Get it? Got it? All right. An example of the panel's determination to de-emphasize reports was indicated by its refusal to accept the conclusions of the United States Navy Photo Interpretation Laboratories PIL analysis of the famous Trans Mountain, Utah motion picture films taken on July 1952. All right, 1,000 man-hours were spent in carefully studying individual frames of the films, and the PIL stated that the objects cited were not birds, balloons, or aircraft, were not reflections because there was no blinking while passing through 60 degrees of arc, and were therefore self-luminous. Despite the exhaustive study, these conclusions were not accepted by the Robinson panel, which questioned the method used by the analysis and assumed the objects must have been balloons or birds. So no matter how clear the evidence was, behind the scenes, whether it's the FBI, CIA, Air Force, Navy, whoever, Pentagon, they covered it up, they dismissed it, just like the Kennedy assassination, just like Oklahoma City bombing, just like 9/11. The U.S. aircraft Liberty bombed by Israel. Look that up. What do you know? I'll bet you don't know that Israel was bombing the smithereens out of a U.S. aircraft with our people on board waving hello to the Israeli aircraft. Hey, we're friends. But the Israelis want, according to what I read, to sink the ship with no witnesses and blame it on the Egyptians because the U.S. was friendly with the Egyptians and Israel didn't want that to happen. They wanted USA and Egypt to be enemies, which benefited Israel at that time. So if they would do that, and it seems, as a lot of people have said in many videos and books, that Israel had a strong hand in 9/11, which I believe was also part of the Zionism, Illuminati, Freemasonic, Kabbalah, Hollywood, banksters, Vatican included. Getting back to my nightcap report. It was concluded by the panel that the reasonably explanations could be suggested for more sightings than by deduction and scientific method. It could be induced, given additional data, that other cases might be explained in a similar manner. So they're saying, no matter what your evidence, who sees it, who photographs it, it's all debunked. It doesn't exist. Look the other way, folks. Meanwhile, Congress was having hearings because they were worried if UFOs came over the North Pole, we would think it was Russian missiles. That was a genuine concern. And all those books I have that were written, all these videos I've done. All right, moving on. The panel's justification for debunking sightings, which by itself had some merit, was that intelligence channels might be clogged by UFO reports. Such channels, they said, should be left open specifically to receive any indication of an enemy threat. Just like those pedophilias over there in Britain, they went so high up into government that the whole investigation had to be shut down because of national security threat. That's insane. The mafia is probably so, which is part of these Illuminati, Freemason, occultic groups, in control of the USA and the world, that you can't expose it because of national security threat. They have inventions for alternate energy that could give all Americans and world people free energy and solve a lot of problems. But the powers that be and their economic base would be threatened, so we can't have it because of national security threat. Tell me what I'm not saying is true. Comment in the comment section of my video. Tell me. Alright, an alternate solution, of course, would be to have turned the problem over to scientists instead of the intelligence community, as has been done recently. So again, who controls the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Pentagon, CIA, FBI? Does the president have a need to know? Would the president, like Kennedy, be killed if he tried to force his way into the inquiry of the UFOs and other issues? The secret government running things, causing a dozen different financial collapses since 1913, when the Bank of England, the Bank of Germany, the Rothschilds, the Illuminati, created the Federal Reserve over Christmas vacation, December 21st, basically taking over the USA money supply, controlling all our politicians and everybody, if they control the money. As Mr. Rothschild said, I care not who the president or who the leaders are of any country in the world. As long as I control the money, I control them. So in 1913, the USA lost its freedom when the Rothschilds, Illuminati, Bank of England, Bank of Germany, created the Federal Reserve, and hence could throttle interest rates up and back, money supply up and back, and crash the economy at will where people can't pay their bills. Is this simple enough for you to understand and for me to understand? But when they throttled back on the money and they raised the interest rates, jobs were lost, and people couldn't afford to pay their mortgages, had to sell their properties on pennies on the dollar, and the people back at the Federal Reserve, the Illuminati, Freemasons, and banksters, and all the other elitists, Vatican, kings and queens of England, could buy up everybody's stuff on pennies on the dollar. And then after everybody was broke and destitute, they would start that engine up again, put money back into the economy, lower the interest rate, and everybody would get back to work and start accumulating more, maybe over 10 years. Then they would throttle back on the money, raise the interest rates, everybody couldn't pay their bills again, and they reaped in and took all the wealth again. Time after time. They have it down to a science. All right. You're going to get it? This is crazy. What I'm going to tell you next in this Nightcap Report. I better hold it up here so you can see it and know that I'm not lying. Pause the thing and read that paragraph. All right. The purpose of the debunking would be to induce a reduction in public interest in flying saucers, which today evokes a strong psychological response. The education could be accomplished by mass media such as television, motion pictures, and popular articles. There would be a much less stimulation if the secret is known. Such a program should tend to reduce the current gullibility to the public. and consequently their susceptibility to clever, hostile propaganda. The mass communication techniques would include psychologists, amateur astronomers to spread the gospel. Colleges, high schools, business clubs, in other words, all the propaganda forces possible, the scientists suggested, should be utilized to back up the panel's recommendation. So they're admitting here that they're using all the resources, TV, newspapers, articles, motion pictures, to create what you think and believe, to ridicule, to make fun of, cartoons. Nationwide, worldwide, mind control. It was interesting to note that none of the members of the panel were loath to accept that this Earth might be visited by extraterrestrial intelligence. Beings of some sort, someday, the report states, but present astronomical knowledge of the solar system makes the existence of intelligence beings, as we know them, elsewhere on Earth extremely unlikely. Meanwhile, Barbara Banachek and many others, Albert Pike, Helenita Blavatsky going over there to the Himalayas and Tibet, speaking to the masters, Alice Bailey and many others, through channeling, talking to entities on the other side, which has been part of the secret occultic organizations worldwide for thousands of years. People are aware of the history of burning witches, magicians working for the kings and queens all over the world. This is nothing new. This new age is a return to the old age. All right, let's examine some actual descriptions of sightings. A wide variety of citizens, including experienced pilots and police officers, have continued to report UFO sightings throughout September and October. With the exception of flurries located on Long Island and in greater Washington, D.C. area, including many erroneous reports, no geographical pattern is apparent. So apparently in Long Island and Washington, D.C., they had flurries of sightings back in 1966, September and October. Though they are comparatively few in number, the authenticating sounding reports involve typical UFO features such as landings and near landings, pacing of vehicles, and sharp maneuvers. A new case of a UFO extending a rod-like structure which touched wires, first reported by John Fuller in the incident at Exeter, came on July 16th at Mount Sunapee, New Hampshire. Mrs. Gordon M. Avery told NICAP investigators John Maloney that she saw a white oval object about 4 a.m. while investigating the source of a brilliant light illuminating her living room. To the east, she saw the UFO apparently hovering a few feet above the telephone wires. As she watched, a jagged extension protruded from the object, seemed to touch the wires. It had no apparent physical effect. Sounds like to me the UFO craft was charging its batteries. After about 5 minutes, the rod retracted and the UFO began moving northeast, accelerating and disappearing over a mountain at high speed. During the second half of August, the number of sightings in the Saskatchewan, Canada, were reported by a local newspaper. The unverified reports included a car pacing incident August 17th and landing of a UFO which rested on tripod legs August 18th and intense lights which maneuvered low over a field. Moving on, my phone rang. I had to answer a business call. All right, another unverified landing report came from Gwinnett, North Dakota, September 13th, where a youth said he saw a UFO about the size of a car land in a plowed field about 7:30 a.m. The UFO reportedly looked like two bowls put together with three pegs on the underside, antenna on top. This sounds like man-made craft. Earth-made. A set of 3 holes arranged on a triangle were found, each measuring about 12 inches in diameter. I lost my favorite glasses. I got to use these cheap ones to read. A set of 3 holes arranged in a triangle were found, each measuring 12 inches in diameter. So they went out there in the field and found the holes. 5 inches deep, the triangle measured 22 to 26 feet on the side. The youth said the UFO had a translucent bubble on top. A similar group of fragmentary reports, including a youth's account of a disc with transparent dome, were reports by residents of suburban Washington, D.C. during October. More substantial reports came in late September from Florida to eastern Canada, Massachusetts, and Indiana. Meanwhile, the government, the Air Force, and everybody else says, it's all in your imagination, a mirage. Satellite UFO landing case in Massachusetts. A huge UFO surrounded by a series of maneuvering lights was seen resting on Cranes Beach in Ipswich Bay, Massachusetts at approximately 4:45 a.m. And pardon me for not saying some words correctly. You get the point. By Mr. and Mrs. Ronald McGilvery, September 17th, an object that glowed with a golden white light, sometimes dim and then bright enough to see the sand around the base, was observed near the water's edge, according to NICAP investigator H.W. Easman in the report to NICAP Massachusetts Subcommittee Chairman Raymond Fowler. Description of the phenomenon placed them in the category of satellite object, cases UFO evidence, a pattern which has persisted for many years. The UFO, which appeared to tilt at times, disappeared with the break of dawn. A dotted line effect seemed to extend from the middle of the object to the ground. During the 1 hour period that the object was sighted, the witnesses watched 2 bright lights above the beach moving toward the UFO with a skipping motion alternately between a fast and slow speed. As they appeared to come together at the top of the landed UFO, a third light was seen. The lights then left the UFO from time to time, flying over the bay and occasionally disappearing behind the Cranes Beach hills. One of the object, elliptical and with a faint glow that showed its outline, flew close to the water towards the McGilvery home. It went from sight behind the small island about 1/4 of a mile from the house. The Brookline police station received 2 calls that evening of a large bluish-green egg-shaped object hovering over a park. Further check-in by Raymond Fowler revealed that the Coast Guard was not aware of any aircraft in the area. Fowler also reported that Echo 2 passed over the area more than 4 hours before, and Venus did not rise until 1/2 an hour after the sighting occurred. So it wasn't a satellite, and it wasn't Venus. The time and description of the sighting would rule out any of these natural explanations, he said. Moving on, a cone-shaped UFO described as a good city block long completely shadowed and paced a small private plane piloted by James O'Connor at approximately 10 a.m. on a beautiful clear day, September 20th, over Sebring, Florida. Flying at an altitude of 9,500 feet, the pilot, who spent 8 years in the Army Security Agency, first saw the object about 500 or more feet above me. He then began to ascend and level it off at 10,000 feet. The UFO began to get bigger, taking 37 seconds for it to enlarge from the size of a silver dollar to the size of what I would estimate a football field, the shadow of which completely engulfed the plane. Can you imagine seeing a flying saucer the size of a silver dollar in a distance, and as it comes closer and it gets over your plane, the size of a football field, and the shadow completely puts a big shadow over your plane from the sun. It was completely engulfed the small plane. The noise that came from the object was described as being like rubber tires screeching on a rainy road. O'Connor said that he was in the shadow of the object for about 3 minutes. Oh my. I then pulled power off my craft, he said, put on carburetor heat, pulled the nose up until I stalled. That's how you can do a fast dive. And as I dove as fast as permitted without pacing undue strain on my airplane, I dropped to about 3,500 feet before I looked up again, and that's when I was frightened. That thing had not changed size at all. It was still with me. So he stalled and went into a dive from 10,000 to 3,500 feet, and the football field object stayed with him. It was still as big as a football field. I banked to the left. It was still above me and beside me. I banked to the right. Same thing. I pulled up in a power stall and peeled off. The thing was with me all the time. Just as he was ready to shoot at the UFO with a .38 caliber pistol, the object appeared to change shape, first to a wedge, then a thin line, and then disappeared. So it probably looked like this when it was above him, and when it turned away, all you can see is the thin line instead of the flat surface. All right. We don't have aircraft like that could do this, I think. It was more like the thing was falling up. O'Connor, an insurance adjuster with a law degree, said he felt apprehensive during the sighting but experienced no air turbulence. Near landing, observed by RCAF, a round, shiny UFO that hovered close to the ground, then shot straight up and disappeared at tremendous speed, was observed by 8 members of the Royal Canadian Air Force. And 2 fishermen in 2 places 45 minutes apart on the Canadian province of Prince Edward Island off the north shore of Maine. According to the Journal Pioneer, the RCAF members were refueling an aircraft in the Prince County town of Summerside about 6:30 a.m., September 21, and spotted the object in the east traveling at great speed. So I'm just going to do short synopsis for the rest of these readings here to try to get through with this nightcap report. You get the idea of how powerful this stuff is. And you can see in this issue here that they're debunking and ridiculing and mind controlling the public and thinking that we're gullible. We better wake up. 2 kinds of people. The evil ones with their own personal agenda, and the rest of us who read the paper and watch TV, the nightly news. And many people, because if you're a good person, you assume other people are good. If you're a bad person, you assume other people are bad. It's basic psychology. I went to Psychology 101 and 102 in community college. And that's how people think. A thief thinks everybody's a thief. So good people watching the news and their newspapers believe that that's what should be true, what's being told to them. It's not true. You're being deceived. Some Arabs in a cave didn't do 911. As Einstein said, when asked about the UFO people, he said the people saw something. See, you don't have to be Einstein to figure that out. And if the government is behind the scenes into the occult, Kabbalah, Zionism, Freemasonry, Illuminati, Vatican, controlling the public, mind controlling the public, creating situations to cause World War I and World War II, as they admit, I mean, the UK supposedly part of it in cahoots during the Civil War between the North and the South, so that they could weaken the nation and take over America after we gained our freedom. Do people know that? Is that true? These people behind the scenes are evil. So I suspect that they think that all the rest of us are evil too and would do things to them that they're doing to us if we could. They do not understand decent people and love and that kind of mentality. It's abhorrent to them, just as their behavior is abhorrent to God. Chaos in the Middle East, the Ukraine, craziness in the USA, sending all the jobs to China. Meanwhile, in the background, all the Freemasons, Illuminati, Satanists, and all those crowds, Zionists, and politicians that are bought and paid for, not representing we the people. What did Obama say in the news last week? Through hook or crook, he's going to improve the economy. Well, if you've listened to Obama or Bush, I'm not a party politic guy, you have to believe the worst, the opposite of what they say is the worst. So when Obama said through hook or crook, he's going to get his agenda through, even with the presidential decrees, you know he means the opposite. He's going to kill capitalism, try to cause a revolution to bring about the New World Order. He's got 2 years and he's got nothing to lose but do it. Meanwhile, we got UFOs being sighted on MUFON now. Who are these aliens? Craft? Who do they belong to? And do we, the people, have a right to know? Should we be concerned about being sprayed with chemicals in our sky? In this document right here, they're 53, they were into weather modification. Hurricane, what do they call that? Storm fury in this book? This NICAD report? All right, police cite UFO near Indiana hospital. 1966, remember. 2 Anderson, Indiana police officers cited a highly maneuverable UFO shortly after 2 a.m. September 30th, after leaving community hospital. The incident was investigated by the Anderson NICAP subcommittee. Under NICAP member, obtained a copy of the police log for the case. Just after turning south on Madison Avenue, Officer Dave Lear, L-E-H-R, noticed an object in the southern, I don't know how the brain does that, in the western sky moving south. He called to the attention of his partner, Officer Bill Carr, who was driving. Officer Carr pulled the police cruiser to the side of the road, with the 2 men observed an aerial phenomenon. Remember Night Siege, the video I went through? So 1983 to 1984 in Connecticut and western New York and western Massachusetts. Football field-sized V-shaped craft were in the sky. Frequently, interstates, all the cars were pulled over, looking up at the sky. You'd think that would be national news and every USA citizen on this planet would know about it. World citizen. The UFO resembled a satellite, except that it was below the overcast and made a sharp turn to the southwest as they watched. It was a plain white color until it neared a group of trees to the southwest. Then it suddenly changed appearance to a red flashlight. Shortly afterwards, it hovered and then began descending toward the ground. For about 5 minutes, the UFO seemed to hover. at times rising and descending. A very large bluish white light pulsated around the object as it maneuvered near the trees. Lear and Carr radioed for another cruiser to come witness the UFO, but about 15 seconds before the second vehicle arrived, the object disappeared behind the trees. Then you got more issue on the Ravenier report. After allegedly reviewing all the evidence of the Ravenier case, we talked about that. Due to scientific and congressional pressures, the Air Force stated September 30th that its original evaluation, a satellite and the planet Venus, will stand. So that goes into a very long description here of the Ravenier, R-A-V-E-N-N-A, you can look it up, report. FAA investigates in Tennessee. I must be getting tired of reading. I'm reading poorly again. 2 UFOs, one of which appeared to shoot out a straight beam of light toward a plane, was spotted by Maxie J. Fox, a student of East Tennessee State University. Holtz goes into all that. UFOs returned to Wanacue Reservoir. A UFO that hovered low over a reservoir, seen by a police officer, performed erratic maneuvers at tremendous speeds and left behind a slight mist, is one of only many reports from Wanacue, New Jersey, about 40 miles northwest of New York City, during the month of October 1966. Here's a copy of a Air Force regulation. Unidentified flying objects, Air Force Regulation 80-17. The regulation establishes the Air Force program for investigating and analyzing UFOs over the United States. It provides for the uniform investigation procedures and release of information, the investigation and analysis prescribed as related directly to the Air Force's responsibility for the air defense of the United States. The UFO program requires prompt reporting and rapid evaluating of data for the successful identification. Strict compliance with this regulation is mandatory. I'll show you this. So you don't believe in UFOs. Like Einstein said, they saw something. Alright, then they had the hasty ball lightning theory. Again, the Air Force and other people would tell people they saw ball lightning. UFOs with flashing lights seen over Newark. Capital area sightings. I'll read this one. Fast-moving, rotating UFOs have been reported frequently in the suburban Washington, D.C. area during October. Late in the month, an unusual amount of ground smoke causing stars to flash and pulsate strangely touched off some false reports. None of the sightings was reported by the local press. Citizens independently reported to NICAP. A bright object with a greenish-white glow was observed moving erratically over Galesville, Maryland, October 12th by Mr. and Mrs. S.B. Wright. When an airline passed below the UFO, the object emitted a streak of light downward, then disappeared. About 10 hours later, over suburban Silver Springs, Mr. and Mrs. Smith reported seeing a red object leave a short vapor trail. Moving very rapidly, the UFO made a sweeping turn and then reversed its direction. Antarctica sightings disclosed in London. Commercial pilot reports 1957 UFO. A multicolored UFO emitted a 40 to 50 feet in diameter, estimated, that it maneuvered sharply near their aircraft at high speeds was reported by 2 commercial pilots near Pampa, Texas, about 8:15 p.m., October 23rd, 1957. In a detailed report to NICAP, pilot Emerson G. Goff said he was descending from 14,500 feet to 10,500 feet when both he and his passenger, Harold Briggs, saw an exceptionally bright star above and to the left. Moments later, the star appeared to approach them at high speed, its apparent size increasingly rapidly. At that point, I made out a faintly solid elliptical shape with an apparent rounded upper portion. Goff stated it was, last page here, lit up so brilliantly in a bluish, greenish, white brilliance that it was really hard to discern. Just the exact shape it did have. A separate yellowish white brilliance was noted on top. Now ahead of Goff's plane, the UFO began a rapid vertical climb, quickly leveling off and continued horizontally. The movements were abrupt and did not appear to affect the object. Finally, the UFO vanished into the storm clouds. I find that interesting that a lot of these sightings, the UFO takes off into a storm cloud. I must conclude that the object was an unknown airborne phenomenon, Goff said, of immense brilliance and apparently under some kind of remote or onboard intelligence control. So here's one guy tracking a UFO with a theodolite telescope. He was looking at the moon when he saw a UFO in there. Alright, the investigation net expanded a new view of Mars. So they're seeing tall, high towers on Mars with telescopes. So there you have it. Back in 53, whatever, they were Storm Fury? What did I call that? Where this McDonald was working for, who became a UFO investigator? Hurricane modification. Storm Fury, Project Storm Fury. Look it up. So, you know, when they tell us they're not controlling the weather and they're not sky spraying us, when you can look up and take a picture, you go on MUFON and see what citizens like you and I have reported today. You've seen my videos, you saw the pictures I took of the 6 or 7 orbs, brown, orange orbs. Talk to people you know. Everybody, a lot of people I know these days have seen something at least some time in their life. And then you got Albert Pike, Helena Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, and Barbara Manichek here, channeling information from some so-called Palladians, which is mentioned in the Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma and other documentation. The Palladians, or the Orions, from Orion's star system, the Vedas, what do they call it, Vedas on the internet, you can go look up. Look up some Palladians and look at some of the current videos. I've been watching at least half a dozen in the last couple of days to prepare to do this book. And it's amazing who they are, who they say they are, why they're here, what they did, what they want to do, what they talk about the Anunnaki of Zechariah Stitchens, the god who came down to earth to mine for gold thousands of years ago, left the monuments. What is real? What's it got to do with the New Age and the New World Order, where they want to change our culture, and the Bible to persecute, prosecute, behead the Christians when they won't embrace the new satanic Luciferic culture and accept the mark of the beast that the Bible says if you do, your soul is doomed forever. Who's going to take that chip if you're a Christian and you believe that? They have plans for that. Look up on the internet, truck drivers talking about guillotines shipped to army bases. Government buying bullets. FEMA camps all over the U.S. That's why I do these videos and call it Freemasonry and Satanism. Little did I know the title of the series is so correct. I mean, you get the snake symbol. Satanism is the snake. This was the snake in the Garden of Eden that talked Adam and Eve into the eating of the fruit, the apple. Whether a true story or just a metaphor, an analogy, whatever, It was a snake. And all the cultures all over the world have the snake person, snake creatures in dragon form, in snake form, in half human, half snake form. Where are these creatures coming from? Reptilians. So I've been studying these different books on these different subjects by different authors, and most of them get the information through channeling through these different alien or entities. But what's it got to do with our future now, with the so-called coming revolution they're trying to cause in the USA? What did they do in Russia when they caused the Russian Revolution in 1917? The Bolshevik Revolution. Didn't they kill 60, 70, 80, 100 million good people? Teachers and Christians and decent people? The Bolshevik Jewish folks? The Zionist folks? Into the Kabbalah? The French Revolution. Didn't they do a purge then too? Just saying. In China, Mao. Didn't they do a purge when they did a revolution? Millions died. What do they do in Iraq and Syria and all over the Middle East right now when they attack those countries? Get your NATO troops in helicopters listening to rock and roll with machine guns just shooting at all these people, murdering them. And we have a high suicide rate of USA troops coming back home. I wonder why. Think their conscience bothers them, what they seen and what they did? The Ukraine. The NATO satanic Zionism Illuminati Pentagon, helped ouster the president, telling the citizens that life would be better if you get rid of this president. And what happened now? Life is a hell of a lot worse. Plus all their gold, 35 tons according to King Reporting, look it up on the internet, don't believe me, was shipped out of there overnight to the New York Reserve or something. Somebody stole all of Ukraine's people's gold, gave them a puppet president. Now they're at war partially with Russia. That should be a lesson for us USA people to listen to. Whether you're black or white or red or yellow or male or female or gay or straight, religious or not, we shouldn't buy this revolution news because things are going to be worse than they are now. What's it got to do with the aliens and craft? Is it the occultic satanic witchcraft? Are they opening up interdimensional portals? Like at CERN, that scientist that came out recently and said, we shouldn't operate CERN. We don't know what we're doing. We could open up a black hole into another dimension. Maybe they could crack the Earth open with HARP systems all over the world. Why do they have a dozen strategically located microwave HARP transmitter systems located all over the world? That sounds kind of ominous. And I'm rambling on. I think you get the point. We, the people, need to quit being, as this NICAP report said, gullible. We can't believe. We need to assert ourselves and organize into groups and have meetings and discuss it and try to elect good politicians. But they've got the game rigged. I mean, you don't have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. You can't compete with these family dynasties getting into the House of Representatives and the Senate and apparently the presidency with, the potential candidates for the next election. Hillary Clinton, again, another Clinton, and Jeb Bush, again, another Bush. How bizarre does it have to get for people to wake up? Rick Miracle reporting. Thank you for watching my video.